repot your native European yew in the UK?
Probably about mid-March.
Is that later than other species or earlier or at the same time?
About the same, really.
So in Japan, when we were dealing with yew, we always repotted yew. We always repotted yew trees later than everything else. We repotted them in April, after the buds had already started to open. Do you repot when the buds have started to open? Or earlier? Before?
Yeah.
Just as they're swelling?
Yeah, basically.
So maybe that's a difference. That could be a very fundamental difference in the two species. Or it could be that you also might get a little bit more out of a tree. Do you have lag time when you repot your yews? Is that first year after repotting, do they struggle at all? Do they slow to grow? Do they not grow as long or as vigorous? No difference.
Can't say I've noticed, right?
No difference.
No.
Oh, cool.
Cuspidata. Repotting. Would you repot the Cuspidata more than other trees?
More than other trees?
Yeah.
No. Why would I? Why would you
Just
think
I
so?
read something about Cuspidata that you should repot them roughly about every 2 to 3 years.
No.
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 Right. I put what doing
Why do you guys repot trees? People in the workshop, you can't say anything. Why do we repot trees? And what's that?
Basically, just stop them getting root bombing to revitalise the roots.
Revitalize the roots.
To get new air back into the roots and
You get new air back into the roots.
create fibres more root by pruning. Get more fibres in the structure, in the tree.
So, are you saying that if you don't repot, there won't be air in the roots?
Oh no, you can put air in, you can spike them and stuff like that. But it's sometimes, sometimes pines get a lot of mycorrhiza in. A lot of mycorrhiza in.
Okay, and what does the mycorrhiza do?
Clogs all the drainage holes.
Clogs the drainage holes. So what happens if the drainage holes are clogged?
It gets waterlogged.
It gets waterlogged. Okay, so you lose water percolation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but
Sometimes you can't get water in the tree.
So so you can't get water into it, or maybe it holds water too long and it rots. So now all of a sudden, the question that I started with has changed immensely. Okay, so we got to get air into the tree, we got to replenish the roots, but really what we're talking about is water's not really moving through the root system. Because if we don't have water moving through the root system, now it means we've probably got a problem with an imbalance of water and oxygen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's be really clear. Let's be really, really clear about why we repot a tree, okay? You repot a tree for 3 reasons. You guys just identified one of them. Loss of water percolation. There's 2 others.
To renew the growing medium if it's broken down too much.
Okay, to renew the growing medium if it's broken down too much. So could you say that if it's broken down, you're going to have a loss of water percolation?
just become a solid lump on.
What's that?
It just end up as a solid lump.
Okay, it'll end up as a solid lump. So that kind of fits into the first reason, right? Okay, alright, so give me 2 others.
With restyling, if you want.
Very good, restyling, excellent. Okay, so you got a change in angle, change in front, change in container. Okay, that's a great one. One more. So we talked about broken down soil. If you have broken down soil, what's the repercussion of broken down soil? Besides loss of water percolation. What happens to the tree?
Retention of water.
Okay, retention of water. What happens if we have too much water retention?
It rots.
Okay, so we get loss of health, right?
Yeah.
Now let me ask you something. Do we ever repot a tree if we have loss of health? Do you repot a tree when it's unhealthy?
Yes, I think it's not right.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Never repot a tree when it's unhealthy. Okay? Never repot a tree when it's unhealthy, but we're saying that one of the reasons you repot a tree is because it's lost its health. What happened there? You guys tell me. How do you repot a tree successfully? You have a healthy tree to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So repotting is a very significant operation. Yeah? It's also one of the most misunderstood aspects of bonsai. Okay?
Yeah.
So when we talk about health, when you talk about health in a tree, right? How do you achieve health? How do you achieve health? There's 3 things a plant needs. Oh, 4. No, 3. I'm going to say 3.
Clean water.
Light water.
Light, water, and
Food.
Big bird.
Yeah.
Food.
air.
Yeah.
Light, water, air. That's it. Nothing else matters, right? But what about that food thing? What is that food thing? What is food to a plant? Really, what is food?
It's a stimulant.
Okay? It's a supplement, right? It's a supplement. So when you talk about a plant feeding itself, how does a plant feed itself? Photosynthesis. Is there food necessary for photosynthesis? No, what's necessary? Light, oxygen, water. Light, oxygen, water, and hopefully foliage, right? We need foliage. If we have no foliage, this conversation isn't worth having, right? Okay. So when we start talking about these things, we're saying health, we need light, oxygen, and water. Very good. Okay, we're getting somewhere. I like this. I like where this conversation is going. So if we're talking about health and we need light, oxygen, and water, okay, what makes our bonsai healthy? Okay, assuming we have light, what is this oxygen and water? Where does it need to exist?
Through the floor of the tree, really.
Okay, the flow of the tree, but somebody said the roots. The roots, very good. So when we talk about a healthy bonsai, we've got, hopefully, a balance of oxygen and water in the roots, right? A balance of oxygen and water in the roots. What determines whether or not we have a balance of water and oxygen? What determines that? We're growing bonsai in a pot. What determines whether we have water and oxygen in there?
The drainage. In the mix.
The drainage? How about the media?
In the mix.
The soil, the mix. Okay, the media. You said the mix, got the mix. Okay. So we're saying now that the mix is very important, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking for a mix that gives us a balance of water and oxygen. Obviously, the manner in which we water our trees is going to have an impact on that. Let's assume we're all expert waterers, okay? Mix that as a balance of water and oxygen. So we're looking for media that holds moisture, looking for media that maintains air spaces, right? And then we know that bonsai really, if we're going to push them to the level that we want them to be, we do want them to have nutrition, okay? So we're looking for something to bind nutrition. We all on the same page here?
Yeah.
Anybody falling asleep yet? I saw that back there. Okay, so when we start talking about loss of health, or lack of health, right? Is it safe to say, chances are the major cause of loss of health is a lack of balance between water and oxygen in the roots? Is that safe to say? We've got disease and insects, we've got drought, heat, cold. If we have a good balance of water and oxygen and we're promoting ultimate health in a tree, do we increase the tree's resistance to those things? Yes, okay. So if your tree is becoming susceptible to these things, can you say there's potential for us to have an imbalance that's now weakening the tree and now it's become susceptible? Is that realistic?
Yeah.
Very realistic, right? Okay, so that's not to say every time your tree gets a disease you have to go looking at it and saying, do I need to change the soil or am I doing something wrong? That's not what I'm saying, right? But I am saying that a healthy tree will have more of a resistance to that than an unhealthy tree, okay?
Yeah.
So, when we start talking about all of these things, right, it brings to mind the necessity to contemplate soil. And soil is a big conversation, okay? Akadama or no local resources or pumice or kyuryu or hyuga or this percentage of akadama or this percentage of akadama. And we talked about this in the workshop, right? But it's a good time to talk about it now too, because we're talking about having this tree respond properly, right? So when we start talking about soil, one of the things that most people don't discuss is particle size. Particle size. What particle size is ideal for a healthy tree? How do we even know that?
It depends on the size of the tree.
Does it depend on the size of the tree? Does it?
Not necessarily.
What's that?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So then what's an ideal size? How do we know that? Ooh, big question. Have you guys ever asked yourself this?
It depends on the size of the tree.
Look at what it grows in nature. Sort of the same medium.
Oh, interesting thought. Look at what it grows in nature. So when you collect these things out of nature, are they necessarily healthy?
No.
Not necessarily, right? In fact, we're looking for things that are horrifically unhealthy, yeah?
Yeah.
So, can we necessarily use that as a good sample? There was a theory in California for a long time with California junipers that said California junipers grow in the Mojave Desert, and so they don't like water. Okay? And so what the original bonsai artists in Southern California used to do is not water their California junipers. And they were always baffled by how easily California junipers died, right? These things, they grow in the desert, they don't need water, they hate water. I'm convinced of it, they hate water, otherwise they wouldn't grow in the desert. And I don't water them, you're not supposed to water them, and they just die anyways, right? They die anyways, even though you don't water them, they die, okay? As if not watering them was the key to success. Okay, we're not watering them and they die. You know, short-lived plant. What can you do, right? So not native conditions don't necessarily give us the best indication of what a plant needs, right? But when we talk about bonsai, what type of roots are we trying to facilitate the growth of?
Fibers.
Fibers. Why fibers?
Because fibrous roots and veins feed the tree.
They feed the tree. So you're telling me that these fibrous roots, those are the ones responsible for the uptake of moisture and nutrition. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, alright. So what particle size facilitates fibrous root growth? Bigger particles or smaller particles? Bigger?
Smaller.
Smaller?
We'll have to split to get through them.
Well, now we've got a 50-50 split. We need the jury. Can we, as a group, decide which particle size facilitates fine root growth? Larger or smaller?
Smaller.
Smaller?
That's what you're going to call large and small.
One of the lines that stuck out to me most when I watched the movie Braveheart for the first time is they were talking about the size of spears that they were going to use when the English rode the cavalry. And they talked about how some men are longer than others. And this reminds me of that. I don't know why. I'm sorry if that was crude. So one of the common misconceptions about bonsai is that big trees need bigger soil, right? As if big trees' fine roots are a different size than small trees' fine roots, even the same species. Okay, so when we were at Mr. Kimura's, our soil particle was 1/16 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch for the interior portion of the root ball. Right, and then our drainage layer was between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. Okay, a very small drainage layer. So even if we were dealing all the way down to chewing-sized trees, we use that same size of particle. Okay, even all the way up to trees much bigger than this, because we were still trying to facilitate the same size of root, which was fine roots. Right, those are the ones that take up the moisture. Those are the ones that take up the nutrition, and the mirror reflection of this occurs here. So the finer this root system is, the finer the ramification and development that occurs here. And the whole reason we got on this situation is talking about repotting. We start talking about repotting, and we say we repot to replenish the roots, we repot to build this fine fibrous root system. If you don't repot, you build a finer root system than if you do repot. Okay? If you don't repot, you build a finer root system than if you do repot. Because a fine root system is built over years, right? Over years and years and years. So we say, okay, why do we repot then? We repot because we've lost water percolation. We have a tree that's starting to show health signs because there's a poor condition of soil that's decreased our balance of water and oxygen, right? Or we're changing the style. So if we're going to repot an unhealthy tree, we regain that balance of water and oxygen. Either incline the pot so that we drain the excess water out, or build up a wall that holds water into a pot that's lost percolation so that we can get water to the roots until the appropriate time to repot. Okay, but if we have that ultimate health and then we're training this in the correct manner, we started this whole conversation off by how do we prune How do we prune these things? And we said, when do we repot them now? Right? And then if we're going to repot them, how are we repotting them or why are we repotting them? All of these things that we think about as bonsai enthusiasts, bonsai practitioners, right? Why do we do what we do? That was a long conversation, wasn't it?
I forgot myself that same question.
Why do I do this? Why do I let these trees dictate my life? Any questions? I gave you guys a lot to chew on just now. I hope you digested some of that. I'm gonna let it meditate for a little while and then I'm gonna come back. Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to anyways. Are you seeing what you hoped you'd get to see today coming all the way here?
Yes.
And if you're not, tell me what you hoped you would see. Or what you came here to see, or what you came here to get from me.
Also for back roads.
Later.
That's afterwards, right? That's afterwards.
I mean, basically, we came to see what techniques are there.
Ah. Have you seen anything that you haven't seen before?
Just you're cutting that live vein off.
You haven't seen anybody do that?
No, I've seen people put showers down the side of live veins or things, but I've never seen it took off like that.
Yeah. Well.
I haven't. Probably some of you, most of you with that, but I haven't personally.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I've seen trees where it's just been a live vein and no bark with a steel rod holding the tree together.
sure. There was there used to be trees that would come in. There were several different types of clients that Mr. Kimura had. Some clients would come in and they would say, "There's no way we could ever conceptualize what you can conceptualize in a tree. So we're just, we're gonna let you decide what to do with our trees. Please just make it the best tree possible." And then there were clients that would come in and they would say, "This is exactly how I want this tree to be. Can you make it like this?" And Mr. Kimura would think and he would say, "I can do something very close to that. We'll make it look beautiful." And they would say, "Thank you." And that was how those clients interacted with Mr. Kimura. So amongst all of these different clients, you had these situations where you would get these unique requests to do something that was totally out of the box, right? Something nobody had ever seen before. And I find that happening more and more now with the clients that I have too. They want something very, very different to happen with their tree. And so when you start having these different situations, all of a sudden you have to find different solutions, right? Because every single tree has a different problem. And so for something like this, honestly on a yew tree, I've never done that before. But I've seen it done, I've just never done it myself. But one of the things that we were talking about at the break that I don't know if you guys were cognizant of, the place where the guy wire originated for this tree is actually around a very small branch up here towards the top, right? It doesn't hook to this trunk. Do you guys know why?
You don't compress the flow.
What's that?
You don't want to compress the flow. I'm sorry.
I don't want to compress the flow of vascular stuff on the trunk. Okay, maybe. Anybody else have a different idea? This comes down to sheer physics.
You bent in a different position.
What's that?
We would lever in a different position.
Okay, so I wanted to change the point where the lever was applied, right? So what did I say had to happen when we cut this like this in order for this to be successful? I talked about the way a live vein will bend and the way a live vein will tear.
Yeah.
You guys remember that conversation? So we were talking about a live vein that existed like this, yeah? And I said we had to get this to rotate like this. Rotate. It has to rotate. So the origin of my bend happens here and wraps around the trunk so that as we bent, it pulled that live vein like this. It rotated, right? So it didn't pull it like this because we said that will tear. Right? We don't want tear. Tear is bad. But if we get it to rotate, it'll bend. And that's why this opened up as it did, right? We caused that rotation because our point of origin of application of force was here, pulling that whole trunk this way, which opened that live vein up this way, which is why we had to keep cutting it too, because as it rotates, now it touches, now it rotates, now it touches, right? So when you start doing stuff like this, and this is not beyond the capacity of anybody to do, but one of the things that as I progressed in my apprenticeship and as I've worked on my own at my garden, you start to realize is, there's 5 million things you've got to think about before you can do this piece of work, right? Because if you miss any one of them, you're going to fail. And failure means the tree dies, particularly with this severity of work. So if you walk away with nothing else today, walk away with that concept that there's a whole lot to think about when we start doing this. And your goal moving forward should be to consider all of it the next time you work on your tree.
How long would you leave it now before you change the potting angle?
How long will we leave it like this? So, if we had our choice, we'd leave it like this for another year. We'd leave it like this for another year. But this work actually, in terms of this tree, is not very severe, right? It's not very severe because there's very minimal damage, okay? So if you could provide the correct aftercare, you could get away with repotting it this year. You absolutely could. Now, again, if we had our ideal situation, waiting a year would be better. Yeah, waiting a year would definitely be better.
Could you repot into a smaller pot?
Absolutely. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. Yeah, if we're going to repot, we're going into a smaller pot. So when you repot, and I know this isn't always possible, right? It's not always possible, but it should be a cognizant concept in our mind, and it should be a goal that we strive for. When you repot, because we just talked about this concept of finer roots developing over time, right? Finer roots develop over time, which means if you repot a bunch, you're just rebuilding a root system that has only gotten halfway to where you want it to go, okay? So when you talk about repotting, every 6 to 8 years for a collected tree is very, very reasonable, right? Every 2, 3, 4 years. Not ideal, definitely not ideal. Unless you have one of those 3 factors impacting your decision, you're not repotting just to repot. There is no time frame, there is no schedule, there is no calendar, okay? But when we start talking about repotting, because we're talking about such a long period of time, when we repot, we should be striving to put the tree in the pot that it's going to be shown in. Put it in its finished pot.
Yeah.
If you can, one time into the finished pot. And then you develop the tree, okay? And that's not to say the finished pot doesn't change, because we just said, change in style is one of the reasons that we do repot. But if you can get it into your finished pot, then you've started the tree and you don't have to touch it again. You can build it in that container. Which is why we always style before we repot. So you repot it once and one time only.
Repot has changed a lot over the last few years, hasn't it?
Repotting?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started doing bonsai, what, 12, 14 years ago, it was a thing that, oh, you repot your trees every year.
Right, sure.
Now it's every 5 years and every 6 years, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, repotting's changed. Well, I think, this is a testament to the modernization of bonsai techniques though, right? I mean, all of a sudden, and this is true of Japan too, make no mistake. Japan didn't arrive at the pinnacle of bonsai like 100 years ago. That didn't happen. In fact, and maybe you guys have already, taken the initiative to look and see that, even in the 50 to 60 exhibition range of the Kokufu, the 40s were particularly kind of bleak and not very impressive. But the Kokufu exhibition in Japan was really quite poor in terms of quality, right? And we look at them and maybe we say, oh man, I've got better trees than are actually in there, right? So Japan's bonsai has modernized as well. And one of the striking things that you see in North America that really sort of speaks loud and clear about that is John Naka, who's widely considered the father of American bonsai. He came from his grandfather's was a bonsai practitioner, and he was educated by his grandfather, brought those techniques to the United States, spread those techniques around the United States, and although they still apply and there's still real quality to those techniques, a lot of them have been modernized since then, right? So you see his techniques, and he showed a tree in the Kokufu exhibition, I believe back in the 40s or 50 to 60 span. And now that tree wouldn't get into the Kokufu exhibition, right? And now his techniques are being modernized in the United States, and Japanese techniques have been modernized. So now you see European and American techniques being modernized. Always an evolution. So when you guys build a tree, you set this structure. You get the structure in place. There's 3 elements that give your tree a flow or a direction or a feel. Can you tell me what those 3 elements are? 3. 1, 2, 3.
The trunk line,
Trunk line.
placement of the paths.
Trunk line.
Roots.
Give your tree a flow, a feel, a direction.
Pod?
Trunk line. What's that?
The pod?
Trunk line.
Negative space.
Think about a tree. Think about a tree.
Main branches?
Main branch, trunk, main branch. And apex. Boom. Trunk, main branch, and apex. The way that these 3 elements work together dictates how your tree feels. Right? How your tree feels. Okay? So you see trees and you look at them and you go, whoa, that's interesting. Oof, that's interesting. I have to take another look at that. Okay? Take another look at that. Okay? There's 3 general styles that we can go after when we start styling a tree, depending on how these elements work together. These 3, right? So when we're talking about this, this obviously has the most significance. Okay, this is our main actor in a movie. We'll call this a movie. Okay, this is our main actor, our trunk line. You can't displace that person. Matt Damon, Born Identity. We all seen the Born Identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, even if you haven't, it's just Matt Damon. He's always the lead actor, right? Okay, this is Matt Damon. You don't have a movie without Matt Damon. Right? Now these are your supporting actors, but they bring out the best in the main actor. Okay? Their job is to maximize the main actor's potential, play on his strengths. Okay? Let's say we have a tree. The trunk goes in one direction, the main branch goes in the same direction, and the apex faces in the same direction. All 3 elements agree. All 3 of our major actors agree. What kind of feeling does this tree have?
Calm.
Calm. Very good. Calm. Harmonious. Soft. Feminine. Right? Everybody gets along. Right? Say we have a tree where the trunk line goes in one direction. Main branch goes in one direction, and the apex go in one direction. So the apex and the main branch agree, but they contradict the trunk. What does this make us feel? Immediate response.
Out of balance.
Out of balance? Maybe. We can achieve balance with other branches. Conflict. Conflict.
Sorry, was that
Right? Yeah. Okay. Perfect timing. I love it. I love it. Could not have been better. Okay, so conflict was the word. Conflict. Does anybody else have another word? Conflict.
Interesting.
Interesting. Okay, interest. Very good. Interest. What else? Tension. Conflict. Okay? Tension. So this major character is moving in one direction. These other things are contradicting that. Okay, that creates tension. Right? We're looking at it, we're going, okay, now there's some interest. Interesting and conflict and tension, they all occurred in that same little area, right? That's fundamental. Good stuff. I like it. Okay. Okay, let's say we have a trunk that goes in one direction. A main branch that goes in another direction. Okay, and an apex that moves away from the main branch. Okay, you see this. You particularly see this in European bonsai. Okay, you see this in Japanese bonsai only when it's used well, otherwise it's ostracized. Okay, what does this make you feel?
European? Sorry.
I like it. Yeah.
So now you can have another word.
Dynamic.
Yeah, I like that.
Dynamic. You like it? European dynamic. It's all the same thing. Okay. Here's the thing about this. Here's the thing about this dynamic design. right? 99% of the time, your apex and your main branch need to coincide, okay? For quality bonsai design, 99% of the time, these need to be in agreement, okay? It's that special situation where you can put these out of agreement, contradict this relationship, okay, and achieve dynamic. I'm gonna leave you with that. So, we have a definitive trunk line. Boom, trunk line, got it. There's no combating the fact that this moves to the left, okay? We have a definitive main branch now. No combating the fact that this moves to the left, okay? When we talk about how we're going to style this apex, how is this apex going to be built? Moving to the right or moving to the left? Think about that, okay? It's going to be the last thing that we touch today.
To the right.
It's going to move to the right first, and then at the top it's going to turn to the left.
Towards the middle. You want dynamic and European, you see.
I'm getting that sense, that feeling.
There's a lot of tension in harmony.
This is the 1% tree.
There's a lot of tension and harmony, as I said. Tension and harmony has become overplayed out, is that the gist? Yeah, we've had that, let's go dynamic.
Yeah. That's why you bend the trunk that way.
I bent the trunk that way because I like this. If you guys have to leave, don't. I'm just kidding. I remember when I was a first year apprentice in Japan, I used to sit and watch the older apprentices wire for hours or an entire day, and they wouldn't talk. And they would just wire and wire and wire. Do you guys know who Mr. Rushibata is? Taiga Rushibata. You heard of him, you've seen him in Bonsai Focus maybe.
Yeah.
He's the younger, his father has a nursery, Taisho, when they now work together. Well, Mr. Rushibata was my senpai. He was the oldest apprentice that was there when I got to Japan. And he was very, very strict. And he was extremely, extremely disciplined mentally. Maybe more than anybody I've ever met since. And he would sit for an entire day and not say a single word to anybody and wire. He wouldn't stop. Lunch, he would take 5 minutes for lunch. He would sit back down and wire. Now his kohai, or younger apprentice at that time, immediately below him, they did not get along at all. They got along very poorly because his kohai wasn't as motivated to pursue excellence in bonsai, and Rushibata-san felt like it was disrespectful to Mr. Kimura that he wasn't taking advantage of the opportunity, and so they didn't get along. So part of that was he didn't want to be in the same room as his kohai for too long. And so he wouldn't take a lunch break, whereas we usually got an hour for lunch. He wouldn't take it, he would just continue working, which I thought was quite, well, for me at that time, was just unbelievable. Right? And I used to ask him, because I would sit there and work for 30 minutes or so, and then I would get distracted and want to look outside and think about, whatever, music, or going back to the United States, or this or that. I mean, I wanted to be in Japan, don't get me wrong, but when you sit and wire all day long, it gets old. And I asked him how long it took him to be able to wire all day long. And he sat and he thought for a minute, and he said, 3 years. 3 years it took him to be able to sit and wire all day long. So I thought about that, and he finished a year and a half into my apprenticeship. He graduated and he went on to pursue bonsai professionally on his own. He got the grant and good graces of Mr. Kimura to do that, which is a rare thing. Of all Mr. Kimura's apprentices, only 13 of them have ever actually been told that they're welcome to go pursue bonsai professionally. And so he was off. But I thought about that 3-year point, and I remember hitting the 3-year mark and feeling like, well, I speak Japanese a whole lot better, but it's not any easier to sit and wire a tree all day. But something happened in that 3rd year where I stopped thinking about whether or not it was getting easier, and I just started wiring trees all day. So I thought it was very, very thought it was interesting that he had that in his mind, that he could recollect that time when that shift occurred. You guys enjoy wiring?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Meditative?
Yeah.
Frustrating?
Very relaxing.
Relaxing?
Yeah.
Are you good at wiring?
I'm alright. I wouldn't say brilliant, but I'm alright.
How do you get better at wiring?
Well, the more you wire, the better you get.
Huh?
What's
The more you wire, obviously the better you get.
Mr. Kimura asked me how I learned to wire. We were going to pick up my visa after so I had a 3-month trial period where if he decided that I wasn't gonna work out, he could tell me to leave, and it was perfectly acceptable. And I knew that I'd sort of passed the test when he said, let's go pick up your visa at the consulate. And actually, I'd spoken with Marco when he had come to the United States, and I'd asked him, how did you know when you'd been accepted as an apprentice? And he said, well, when Mr. Kimura said, let's go get your visa at the consulate. So when he told me that, I thought, oh booyah, we're in. Okay, so we're riding to get our visa, and of course when you're riding in the car with him, you feel like you should make conversation, which is not your job as an apprentice, nor does he really want conversation to be going on, or else he would initiate it himself. So I was trying to talk. I learned later that Americans try to talk too much, which you guys echoed today. I was told that by a Japanese guy who I was riding in the car with. But anyways, I was trying to talk to him, and he turned to me and he said, how did you learn how to wire? So we're talking about like birds and nature and stuff. That's what I was asking him. And his conversation was, how did you learn how to wire? And so I told him that I learned how to wire through looking at books. And he said, well, you'll never learn how to wire looking at books. And I said, oh, that's all I really had. And he said, well, I'm going to teach you how to wire my way. And I made the mistake of asking him what his way was. And he said, by showing you how not to do it. So for the next 2.5 years, all of the things that I did right never got acknowledgement, but everything that I did wrong was made more significant to me than anything else in the world. And he used to say that he was imprinting the fact that I had done it wrong in my head so that I wouldn't screw it up again. So he made sure that he made a lasting impression every time he corrected us. It was a good way to teach. Maybe the chief had a different way. How did the chief teach?
How does it work with the apprentice thing? Do you apply to go, or do you have to pay to go and be an apprentice of one of these guys, or?
It depends on who you're studying with, but for Mr. Kimura, you don't have to pay, no, but very few people get to do it. I know now that there's some that you pay to spend time with, and some that I think becoming an apprentice has become a more commercial endeavor for a lot of the new age bonsai professionals. They see it as a money-making opportunity. It wasn't like that for Mr. Kimura. I don't think it is even now. It's kind of, you can romanticize anything that you want if you think long and hard enough about it, but there is a romantic aspect to being an apprentice, the relationship you have with your master, because the longer that you're there, the more significant you realize that opportunity is. And I think when you start trying to sell that, I think it changes that relationship a little bit, but my sort of working my way into becoming an apprentice happened through the recommendation of Ben Oki. I went to Japan with him, and he and Mr. Kimura had been friends for a long time, and he kind of vouched for me. And once he had vouched for me, it was up to me to follow through on that. So I started writing Mr. Kimura letters. And I wrote him a letter when I got home thanking him for allowing me to see his garden. And he didn't respond. And so I wrote him another letter because I worried he didn't get the first. And my second letter talked about school and how I was studying horticulture and how I was taking an extra units so that I could come be his apprentice hopefully someday. And he still didn't respond, and I figured I'd gotten the address wrong. So I wrote him another one, checked the address, wrote him another letter asking him how the weather was and how his health was and how his bonsai trees were doing. And he still didn't respond, so I figured, well, now he's just not responding. Because I had checked the letters and I was having all the Japanese I was writing proofread and all that. Anyways, I continued writing him letters. I wrote him a letter a month for 18 months. And then a month before I graduated college, he wrote me back and said, if you want to come and study, as bad as it seems like you do, you're welcome to, but chances are you're not going to succeed in my garden as a foreigner. And so, you know, the only thing I could read from that was that he told me I could come. I was like, great, I'm going then. And so a month later, I was on my way to Japan.
Were you his first forest student?
No, so Marco, well, way back when, Salvatore in Italy studied with Mr. Kimura for, I believe he was there a month, maybe a month. I think he talks about having been there several years or so. That's not true. He was there for like a month. And I know Marco studied with Mr. Kimura for about 2.5 years. But in terms of, you know, just having stayed the duration, yeah, that's unique to me.
When does an apprentice become a master?
I guess it depends on what your definition of a master is.
Well, the same question, what's a master?
Who's asking me this? Okay. Yeah, good question. So the word master is a very Western thing. Unless you're talking about, we call our Mr. Kimura Oyakata. And Oyakata means master in terms of the person who's taking care of you. It doesn't mean master in terms of master of a craft. There's a very different connotation altogether. But master is not a word that's used in Japan. You know, that's not really a concept that exists. So when you start asking about masters and mastership, it's a tough conversation to have. They call themselves professionals. You know, but that concept of professional doesn't just mean somebody who's making a living doing bonsai. It means somebody who's pursuing excellence in their endeavor. That's a professional. So when does an apprentice become a professional? I think apprentice becomes a professional when they start pursuing bonsai in their own spirit and heart. Yeah. Because everybody's got a manner in which they can copy, and everybody's got a manner that's kind of true to form to themselves. And I think once you leave your apprenticeship, you're always looking for your own personal voice, right? Your own personal style, your own belief in what you do so that you have something that you stand for. And I think once you find that, and I think that's the first step to becoming truly a professional. What do you think, Peter?
I would agree with that. But in terms of the relationship that you have, you're an apprentice until one of your guys. So, it's just who's going to last that longest?
Do you plan to keep along those romantic lines as far as apprenticeships go with you?
What's that?
Do you plan to have your apprentices the same way as you were apprentice for Kimura?
You mean treat them and educate them in the same way?
The same way you said it's getting more commercial in Japan.
Yeah.
You would prefer to keep it the same way as you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there's the thing that happens when it becomes commercial is you're not a family anymore. You know, you're a commodity. You're paid to be showing that same level of consideration and respect. And I really appreciate the fact that, you know, on any given New Year's Day, I can go to Mr. Kimura's garden and with the other apprentices that have received his blessings, be a part of the barbecue where you welcome your master into the new year. You know, I mean, that's cool. That's a very special thing to be a part of. And I don't think you get that same loyalty and commitment to a family when you start buying it. And that's something that I want in my students and my apprentices. Yeah, that's special to have, you know? And I think it all comes down to, when you look at what we're trying to do with the Artisans Cup and in North America, I mean, community is the fundamental focal point of our motivation there. As long as we can build this community, we help each other, we start to facilitate the acceleration of bonsai on that level. And then all of a sudden that opens the door to everything else that really could potentially happen and be good for bonsai in the United States. Well, the garden that I have, you know, Bonsai Mirai, that's maybe, you know, has had a lot of my input, but the place in general is just a special place. And I feel really lucky to be there. But that needs to be shared too, you know, and I think it needs to be shared by people that appreciate it. You know what?
You said last night you had one apprentice. How many would you take on?
I would have 3 apprentices
Sweet.
at any one time. I've had up to 3 apprentices at any one time. But I think, you know, it's like I said before, you can romanticize anything that you want. I mean, I had this image of the Karate Kid when I went to Japan in my head, and I was going to be waxing on and off and painting, you know, fences and I'm not going to lie, it wasn't far from that at times, you know. I mean, we retiled Mr. Kimura's shower. I remember on my first Christmas day in Japan, I was thinking, gosh, how could they not celebrate Christmas, or how could they not be sympathetic to celebrating Christmas? And we were building a bamboo fence, and you know, there was some of that, but in general, being an apprentice is nothing romantic, and in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's very blue collar and sort of an existence of suffering to gain a little bit, suffering a lot to gain a little. But that little bit, you know, in the end, when you accumulate it all, it allows you to do what you love to do for a living. So you say it's worth it, right? But I think when people thus far have come to my garden, my take on their presence has been that they were there thinking it was going to be really romantic, and it's not, right? You know, bonsai, unfortunately, is a blue-collar endeavor. I'm sure Peter would attest to that.
Yeah, very much so. And if you think about if we're running workshops where people like yourself come and pay for it, and then you get somebody who comes along and wants the education for free, it doesn't work. So they've got to pay in kind, and that is blood, sweat and tears. So, and that's what we do. There was one bonsai professional who specialised in citrus trees. He developed techniques that were blowing your mind, absolutely phenomenal techniques. He's developed them himself over many, many years. And some people wanted to sort of study underneath him. And he said, okay, you pay me like I'm at university. If you went to university, you've got the same education as an engineer, you have to pay this much. Right? It's the same education you're going to get here, so pay me. You only get one student. So, there you are, there you go.
There you go.
These techniques are done.
You know what I have found though? I had my very first apprentice was Slovenian, and when he came with it, and I brought him in knowing he couldn't stay. He came for 3 months, and I was excited at this idea of having an apprentice. And he worked really hard, and he was fantastic. I think he still does bonsai. Maybe he's working in Germany as a garden designer as well. He really enjoyed helping me build the garden. But you know, he worked very hard, and he understood why he was there. And now I have a French apprentice who works extremely hard and understands why he's there. And I know that when I went to Japan, there was nothing to do once I got there but work hard, because I had sold everything that I owned and I had committed my life to an apprenticeship. So what was I going to do? Walk away from that? You know, there's no place to go. I didn't have anything else to do but succeed. And I've noticed that with the American apprentices that I've had, it's very easy for them to walk away. And that's not conducive to sticking it out and learning what it means to be an apprentice. Because in the end, you know, Mr. Kimura used to always tell me, you're not here to learn bonsai. You're here to grow as a human being. Bonsai is secondary to what you're getting here during this education. And I really took that to heart, because particularly now, trying to pursue bonsai as a profession, if I hadn't had that, I would fail. I would definitely fail.
Have you had your shower tiled?
Huh?
Have you had your shower tiled by an apprentice?
Have I had, I'm sorry.
Your shower tiled by an apprentice?
Shower tile.
Shower tiled.
Shower tile.
That's Dublin accent.
We actually shower tile by apprentice.
Shower. Shower.
Oh. Apprentices have built a lot of the gardens, I can say that. They've dug a lot of holes. Huh? Peter's dug a lot of holes too.
Some verbally.
You guys watching this come together? Is it happening?
Yeah.
You're seeing a tree being built here. Isn't that wild how that happens?
Now,
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy.
I'm watching you water and you trim it, but you don't have to show me the way you trim it.
Ah. Gotcha. What I'm trimming and where I'm trimming. So anytime that you trim a U, that's a good point. Anytime you trim a U at this time of year, because we said right late November is when we really want to be pruning a U, or late May. For you guys in the UK, it's actually June, right? And that's one thing that I forgot to specify. It's a little bit later because you have a little bit cooler climate. Winter or spring comes on a little bit later, okay? But when you're pruning with the U, you've got all of these little shoots in here. Can you guys see all of these little secondary shoots popping up in here? As long as you cut back to an actively growing secondary shoot, okay? That's just a fundamental drop crotch prune, right? It's a fundamental horticultural prune technique where you cut back to a viable secondary vigorous shoot. As long as you cut back to one of these, you can do that at any time of year. It doesn't matter, because you're maintaining foliage mass and you're maintaining a viable bud that can take over apical dominance of that branch, okay? So when you see me pruning now, we said this isn't the ideal time to be pruning these back. So you could take this and at the time of year where you can prune anywhere, you could cut it all the way back to there and it would still bud, right? As long as there is a little bit of green on there, it will still bud. You may be able to cut it back beyond green and it will still bud. Yews are very vigorous, okay? I'm not saying do that, I'm just saying that you may be able to get away with that, okay? But this time of year we've got to be a little bit more strategic. I'm taking stuff off of the top, I'm taking stuff off of the bottom, leaving laterally facing branches, and then I'm cutting back the long ones to a viable secondary shoot. Okay? You can do that at any time of year. Anybody else have any questions? So I'm not gonna lie, this is the first demo like this that I've ever done where you guys are sat here for so long. I feel bad for you.
Oh, most of you enjoyed it after they've been more people and don't
I hope so. I hope you're not just being courteous now.
What's your favourite species?
My favorite
To
species.
work on?
Yeah, are we talking in general or a definitive?
In
You
general.
mean like pines or junipers, or you mean like what type of
No,
juniper?
no, just general species.
I love pines. I love pines. I can't get enough pine action. I don't particularly like Japanese black pine, and I can't stand Japanese red pine. But I love white pine, Scots pine, mugo, ponderosa, lodgepole limber. I really like the North American pines, although they don't have the same refinable capacity as the European species. They have a wildness about them that is unduplicated, just in their North American character, and I like those. But the Scots pine is pretty hard to argue. Maybe the best pine that bonsai has to offer. I think it's really tough to argue. It's so durable, and it has great bark, and if you find a beautiful collected one. He left, but he had a really beautiful Scots pine yesterday that's just going to be outstanding. But, you know, a lot of the work that I'm doing now is on big collected junipers, because there's so many impressive collected junipers in North America that nobody really, what do you do with them? You know, I mean, they're gigantic, and they're mangled, and they're long, and it's heavy work, and it's highly technical work, and that kind of work needs to be done on those trees to give North America a little bit more of a presence in terms of the bonsai world, because we have the material, and I think that the technical aspect of it will come on a larger scale as more people see it and get to experience it. And so we're doing that work in my garden with my students, and I'm trying to educate people on how to handle those really large, massive trees. We'll see how many people actually take that on and make that their own. It's not easy. We have a juniper right now at my garden that is so big. The tree itself is not, and the trunk is probably this big, and it cascades, and it's only about that long. But when Randy took it out of the mountains, he put it in a pot, because he got the whole root ball, which is not a good idea. The whole root ball is probably about this big, and it's in a pot, and we put it on a cart that we had built. We built this wood cart, and it's crushed the cart, and it flattened all 4 tires. And now the cart is starting to implode under the weight of this tree, and we've tried to pick it up with 5 people, and we can't lift it. The only way we can lift it is with heavy machinery now, and we can't get machinery to where the cart broke down. So I've basically got a permanent juniper in my garden on a broken down cart. We're going to try to repot it this year where it sits so that we don't have to try and pick it up.
Would you class that as a large bonsai, what you're working on now, or a medium one?
This,
Yeah.
I would call this a large tree. Yeah, I would definitely call this a large tree. There's nothing small about this. In fact, you know, the goal is to make this as small as we can, so that it has a little bit more of a bonsai-ish feel. So where is this video going?
YouTube.
Have you seen what happens to videos that I'm in when you put them on YouTube? It causes a humongous problem.
Not lasting.
I don't know what I'd say.
Are you going to reply to that?
No,
No?
no.
No.
There's no reason to reply.
No.
Everybody's entitled to their opinions, right?
No, you're not. Be nice to hear from you on there, alright?
Ah,
Do you know what I mean?
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I've largely stayed away from the internet. I see that as a dangerous,
Yeah.
slippery slope, right?
Ian will need your stage name as we discussed.
is that Mac Milestone? That I heard that from.
Right milestone.
Pandy Manor.
You better explain that, you can't do that
No,
online.
no, that's, you know, maybe for another time. That's dangerous. I've never had such stimulating conversation as a group of Englishmen and a group of Irishmen in the same room and a few bottles of wine. I didn't come prepared for that.
I thought I'd been training you well.
Yeah, well, you didn't embrace me.
I think these people don't drink very much anyway. We also tell lies.
Never touch this stuff.
I witnessed that. What do you think about this branch? What do you think? This feels a little long here, huh? Does still feel a little long?
Okay.
It's coming straight out.
Let me rotate this just a little bit. Feel a little long? It's coming straight out, you said? You want to drop it down in? See how long these feel now? They almost feel like a different tree. Let's separate those. What do you think? Give me your impressions. We'll go back at the end and look at it all again, but I'm moving up into the apex. I'm thinking that this needs to be a little shorter. What do you think?
Good picture.
A little shorter?
What's the next bit
We
back
got-
there?
This guy here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got this one. So I think we can use this one and build it with this one. But maybe we can take this tip off and shorten this back to these three. What do you think? You like that idea? Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit heavy. I don't think we can take it off immediately now. Now we'll be taking branches off in the future. As these branches develop, there'll be some in here that we cut off just because we're leaving them. We've taken off a lot already, right? We gotta be cognizant of that too now. Don't wanna try to get too far down to a finished image. We wanna make sure the tree stays healthy. Alright, I'll take this one off. Wall's in the workshop tomorrow. It's 4, there's 2 more. Kaz is coming.
As and Sue.
Kaz and Sue, alright. We're gonna have to rock out tomorrow. My last day at Willowbog.
Ever.
I love you too, Peter.
How can you feel about tonight?
I got an immense amount of affection from that. See, hanging out with Peter Warren tells me that that's just the British way of saying that they love you.